Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and everyone, we just had one hell of a week one. First Sunday, first 14 of 16 games, however you want to look at it. I'm pumped. It was a great day of football. I hope everyone had plenty of fantasy success out there, betting success, your favorite team won, whatever it might be. We have a lot to catch up on, though, because for the last 7 months, we have been, looking at 2019 stats, coaching tendencies, whatever we can get our hands on during the offseason, and reasonably so. There wasn't much else to do. But now we finally have real-life football to break down, take snap counts, all that fun stuff. So the purpose of today's pod, I want to go through the 13 games from Sunday. I have managed to watch about, what are we at? I'm halfway through game 11, so I have 2 more after this, but usually try to watch 2 live in addition to Red Zone, then I'm flying through them on a condensed as soon as they're uploaded on Game Pass afterwards. So trying to watch every play for all you people out there, try to find anything possible beyond the box score to help us, figure out the real story and move on with some fancy takeaways. So going to roll through these games, and again, going to have a focus on just the fantasy relevance and what we can expect moving forward. So kicking things off, Ravens 38, Browns 6. Just a beatdown from the start. I mean, Lamar Jackson's passing regression, I guess, is just going to come another day. And we've talked about this on this podcast, how you shouldn't assume regression and efficiency without also looking for the volume. But in today's case, it just didn't even matter. I mean, 20 for 25, 275 yards, 3 scores through the air, along with 45 yards on the ground. The best thing to see from Lamar, though, because, let's face it, we've seen him do that a million times last season. He's just so efficient as a rusher and passer. But what was really good to see was just Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews so cemented as the top targets. Hollywood went over 100 yards. Mark Andrews had 5 catches, 58 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of which was an awesome one-handed snag in the back of the end zone. So it's one of these situations where, going into today, especially on DFS, I just made the point that, okay, they're expensive. Lamar Jackson was 8,100 this week on DraftKings. He's probably going to be more so even in future weeks. But, when we do have Hollywood and Andrews, a little more affordable, it made the overall stack not as expensive as it might have been, with a true quote-unquote wide receiver one that's more up there in the pricing range. So good stuff from the Ravens passing game. I don't think Lamar Jackson's going to have another 9% passing touchdown rate this year, but no reason why he can't enable Andrews and Brown to plenty of success moving forward. The backfield was what was pretty interesting because J.K. Dobbins got in there with a 40% snap rate, leading Mark Ingram, who's at 34%. Then we had Gus Edwards at 26%. Dobbins had 2 touchdowns, 2 goal line works, and I don't think he was the goal line back. I think we kind of overrate the situations where a guy truly is the goal line back. What happened was Dobbins got those carries in his shifts when the offense was getting down into that area of the field. So it wasn't like Ingram was down there and they made, the conscious decision to get him out of there and give Dobbins those carries. This situation of who is on the field. So the good news is it looks like a 1A, 1B situation with Dobbins and Ingram. Edwards is going to be a little bit annoyingly involved, but we're going to live with that because it's one of the best offenses in the league. Dobbins is going to be fantasy relevant sooner rather than later. Him and Ingram, I think we can kind of treat them as right around that RB2 borderline, mid, high 20s in that RB range. So we'll see, what goes on moving forward, but it's a good matchup every week for this Ravens offense. For the Browns, way less reason for optimism really around the board. Baker Mayfield just looks skittish out there at times. The types of rhythm throws we saw him in 2018 really thriving on just having been there over the last season and now a game. He just struggled to get much going. OBJ was his most targeted receiver with 10, but he only had 3 catches. Just a mixture of drops, not being able to quite get the separation needed, and Baker not putting it where he needed to. So ultimately only 189 yards on 39 pass attempts. Austin Hooper only had two targets. We had David Njoku, Harrison Bryant really eating into that, and Jarvis Landry was kind of doing his thing on a little bit limited usage, but we knew that coming in. So for the pass game, we got to go back to well with OBJ. This was a tough matchup. We knew that going in, but keep firing him up as that wide receiver 2 that we hope can get back to being a wide receiver 1. Austin Hooper is the one that I really haven't been buying, and I think after what we saw today, it's just more evidence towards that because Stefanski coming back from what we knew in Minnesota with Irv Smith, with Kyle Rudolph splitting them up, he appears to be doing the same thing in Cleveland. So don't be afraid to, not cut Austin Hooper necessarily, but next week, if it's between him and someone else, go with the guy that has a tighter grip on his team's pass game role. With the running backs, so Nick Chubb, 51% snaps, 10 carries, 1 target. Kareem Hunt, 46% snaps, 13 carries, 6 targets. So Chubb got taken off the field a lot after a fumble, and the game got away from that. It became Kareem Hunt game script. That's fine. I think Chubb's still going to be the lead back more weeks than not. But the problem here, people, is it's going to be like a 60-40 or a 50-50 or something like that. It's not what we saw last year, which was Kareem Hunt getting a ton of run in the slot or out wide. And this was a concern with Stefanski, who wasn't able to use Madison and Dalvin Cook at the same time all that often. Appears to be the same case here because Kareem Hunt only spent 4 snaps in the slot or out wide. It does seem like a situation where they're not going to run a lot of 2 RB formations out there at the same time for whatever reason. I mean, they did have a lot of success with that towards the end of last year. They're always open to be able to adjust down the road. But for now, I think the ceiling and floor alike for these Browns running backs should be lower because we're not getting that, snap split we were hoping for, which was Chubb 80% as the running back and, Hunt kind of taking in that 20-25% as a running back and they're 25-30% as a receiver. So Bears 27, Lions 23. Wow, good on Mitch Trubisky coming back. 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter after trailing 23-6. Now, game could have easily gone the Lions. DeAndre Swift had a potential game-winning touchdown, hit him in the chest and fall to the turf. So it wasn't exactly a situation where the Bears just outright beat the Lions, but hey, win is a win is a win. So big fancy takeaways. David Montgomery wasn't at 100%, didn't get 100% roll, played 47% snaps, Tariq Cohen at 42%, Cordero Patterson at 18%. I mean, look, I think moving into next week, assuming Montgomery didn't re-aggravate this, hopefully he's, we get some full practices or he's just not on the injury report period. But I think moving forward, we can be more confident that he's going to get back to that 15-20 carries per game sooner rather than later. He was only at 13 today, but, moving forward, he should be healthy, should be back in that role, and he'll have better, potential game script and trailing like he was today. So arrows pointing out for Montgomery, seemed like a really bad injury when it first happened, but I think he'll be okay moving forward. With the wide receivers, this is what was kind of confusing. So, we know Allen Robinson's the number one. He had a good day, 5 catches, 74 yards on 9 targets. Anthony Miller was the guy I really thought could take a jump up and make it into that territory and be the number 2 guy there with Taylor Gabriel gone. And unfortunately, he was in this weird committee situation. He only played 35% of the offensive snaps. Ted Ginn was at 49%, Darnell Mooney 29%, Javon Wims 31%. So it was just this weird committee behind A-Rob with Ted Ginn being the main guy in 2 wide receiver sets. So, maybe Miller continues to make the most of his opportunities. He had a great game, 4 catches, 76 yards and a touchdown, 6 targets, including the go-ahead score. But, with these types of snap rates, that's not going to stick up week by week. So kind of concerning for Miller moving forward. Lions backfield, complete mess. Adrian Peterson, 37% snaps. DeAndre Swift, 32%. Kerryon Johnson, 31%. I mean, credit to AP. He had 13 carries for 93 yards. He was still good in Washington last year too. It's just not making it easy for fantasy investors trying to get some value here elsewhere. So going to be a situation to mostly stay away from with that sort of usage. Something named Quintez Cephas had 10 targets today. That was pretty interesting. He ended up being the main producer without Kenny Galladay in the fold because of the hamstring injury. Marvin Jones still the guy. Assuming Kenny's injury isn't that serious, I don't think Cephas is going to be someone worth looking up on waivers. But hey, kudos to him for getting that opportunity. Most disappointing thing I saw was that T.J. Hawkinson was actually out-snapped by Jesse James. Just very unfortunate. He caught all 5 of his targets for, I think it was 46 yards in the score because he's a great player. But, only getting 56% snaps in a game where they didn't have their number 1 receiving option. Very disappointing for Hawkinson. He's a great player. I still just doubt whether he's going to truly break out in fantasy this year if he's going to be treated as kind of the number 4 pass game option whenever everyone's healthy. Moving on, we got Washington upset the Eagles 27-17. Carson Wentz was sacked 8 times. And we talked on this podcast about the potential for the Washington D-line to be pretty great sooner rather than later. And okay, it's here. It's now. They are awesome. And, banged up O-line for the Eagles. But at the same time, we got to give Washington plenty of credit for their performance there. The Boston Scott thing did not work out, people. And it's just, it worked. The usage was what we expected. I mean, Boston Scott played 60% of the offensive snaps. Corey Clement was down at 32%. And, Scott had 9 carries, 2 targets. He didn't have the same involvement in the pass game that we saw at the end of last season, which was somewhat surprising. I mean, Dallas Goedert, 9 targets, Deshaun Jackson, 7, Greg Ward, 7, Zach Ertz, 7, and Jalen Reagor had 4. So all those guys are working ahead of Scott. Maybe I guess I underestimated how little he would be involved in the passing game. At the same time, they did already have the injuries at receiver. So it's a miss. Scott did get banged up throughout the game, but, I wouldn't be too concerned about continuing to treat him as, an RB2, RB3 if Sanders is going to continue to miss time. Corey Clement, though, with this sort of role is not going to have any sort of fantasy relevance. So we'll see with the Eagles. It was a tough week. Wentz, was skipping some balls in there, and Djax wasn't able to run down some of the goodness, but Jalen Reagor, if we can get him in a full allotment of snaps moving forward, look out. He had a beautiful 55-yard snag way downfield on a great ball from Wentz. I think big things could be coming from Reagor on the horizon. Do not let him go if he's there on the bench. Dwayne Haskins wasn't amazing, 17 of 31 for 178 yards and a score, but was able to enable Terry McLaurin to a decent day, 5 catches for 61 yards on 7 targets, and Logan Thomas, deep sleeper tight end. Logan Thomas, team high, 8 targets, 4 catches, 37 yards and a score. The touchdown was uncovered. It wasn't the most impressive performance I've seen from Thomas, but hey, 8 targets for a tight end position, we'll take it. I wouldn't be trotting him out there to start in week 2, but I'd say if we get another week or 2 into this where it does look like he has a consistent pass game role of at least 5-6 targets, that's going to be something fantasy investors are going to want to take interest in. The backfield, sheesh. J.D. McKissic led the way with 46% snaps, only had 3 carries, though, 5 targets. And then we had Peyton Barber getting 34% snaps, 17 carries, 0 targets. Wasn't efficient with it at all. He found the end zone twice, good for him, but, fewer than 30 yards rushing on 17 carries. Just hard to call that too good of a day. Antonio Gibson filling it out with 33% snaps, 9 carries, 2 targets. He looked good out there, and, you wouldn't really have known this is a guy, with fewer than 100 career rush attempts, whatever it is, to his name, but was breaking some tackles, showing off some of that yak goodness. Look, it's not his backfield right now, but knowing that they are treating him as that running back, that pony style guy that's going to get these targets. Once J.D. McKissic is out of the picture, which I would expect to be sooner rather than later, maybe not September, but by October, I would like to think Gibson is soaking in most of those snaps, most of those targets. We're going to be looking at a guy getting 10 to 12 rushes with 5+ more targets. That's not far off what Austin Ekeler did last season to get all that sort of fantasy success. So please do not start getting bearish on Antonio Gibson. It's going to be fine. I know it didn't come this week, but Antonio Gibson is going to have much better days ahead. Seahawks beat the Falcons 38-25. They let Russell Wilson cook everyone. It was fantastic. 31 for 35, 322 yards for 4 scores. Took 3 sacks, but no interceptions. He even chipped in 29 rushing yards. One of the crazier stats I found this offseason was Russell Wilson only had 7 design rushing yards in all of 2019. Well, he ripped off a 20-plus yarder on a read option play early in the game. So not saying you got to treat the guy like Lamar Jackson or even like Kyler Murray, but hey, Russ is a great athlete. Why not let him run around even a couple times a game? But anyway, it was Metcalf and Lockett leading the way with 8 targets apiece. But the interesting part of this was DJ Dallas being inactive. It helped get Chris Carson 6 targets, and he found the end zone twice as a receiver, 6 catches as a whole. Here's the thing, though. The concern that we talked about on this podcast before about Carlos Hyde maybe being that true Rashad Penny insurance clause, it came true. Carson only played 48% of the offensive snaps. Hyde was in there for 30%. Travis Homer siphoned away 21%. So with better game script, I think Carson would have been at that 60% line. But for a lot of last season, Carson was at 80%. He just really dominating the workload. So the fact that Hyde is there siphoning off the early down work, it's not good for Carson moving forward. If this offense is going to keep cooking with Russ, okay, they're going to put up points. But, for this to be a game where the Seahawks won by 13, they were in control and didn't have a single running back get over 8 carries. It's fantastic for Russ. It's great for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But, just expecting this sort of consistent production from Carson, we'll see if it's going to become this hot hand approach thing with Carlos Hyde. I wouldn't hate the idea of selling high on Chris Carson if someone's not really looking into these numbers, because it sure looks like the Seahawks are going to be using a committee moving forward. Matt Ryan threw for 450 yards and a pair of scores, a lot of it in garbage time. Julio Jones had a typical Julio game. I did look the stat up once where it was like most games with over 150 yards and no scores, and Julio Jones is, of course, number 1. He had 9 catches for 157 yards. Calvin Ridley found the end zone twice, 9 grabs, 130 yards. And Russell Gage trio of 100-yard receivers, 9 catches for 114 yards. Each of them had 12 targets, and Hayden Hurst was kind of the odd man out with only 5 targets, 3 catches for 38 yards. Todd Gurley wasn't able to get anything going on his 5 targets, just 1 yard. Now, Russell Gage is the interesting one because we're going to see him pop up on a bunch of fab and waiver wire articles this week, and I really don't hate the signing, actually. And this is an offense that is so pass happy that they feasibly could enable 3 fantasy relevant receivers. And you look at what Gage really did last season after Mohamed Sanu was traded, and he was already kind of starting to do this. I mean, from week 8 on, this dude was getting fed targets. And you look at games where he had 9, 10, 9 again, 13 targets. And even in the poor games, I mean, he was getting between 4 and 6 every week. So, look, they're a lot more like low ADOT. They're not as fantasy friendly as what Ridley and Coolio are doing. He's always going to be the number 3 guy in this offense. But, hey, that's the role that Austin Hooper had last season. I know tight end wide receiver is different. But either way, Matt Ryan, is going to throw for enough yards to get 3 people consistently involved. I wouldn't feel all that comfortable starting Gage on a weekly basis, with Julio and Ridley, again, expected to dominate target share more often than not. But, hey, he's one injury away from being an auto-start type guy in fantasy. Falcons clearly think high of him, letting Treadwell go, not signing Sanu, not doing anything in the draft. We got to start looking at Russell Gage as a potential threat because the targets are going to be there. At a running back situation, so Gurley looked very good early. Unfortunately, had my helicopter crash with him, so apologies to everyone out there that had some investment on that. I know I had plenty on it myself, so not feeling great about that. He did look good early though. I mean, like him and David Johnson a little bit on Thursday night. I mean, they showed a little bit blast from the past. Ultimately, Gurley only played 45% of the offensive snaps. Brian Hill was at 28%. Ito Smith, 25%. Similar to Chris Carson, though, I mean, I think Gurley will be touching 60% with better game script. And that's about what we were expecting. I mean, I'm never sitting here thinking that Gurley was going to have 80 or 90% snaps, but it seemed like, in this potential shootout, which it did become a shootout with, 63 points going up on the scoreboard, seemed like a good spot for him to get in the end zone a couple times. And to his credit, he did make it there once. Moving on, we got the Bills beat the Jets 27-17. All right, drum roll. I mean, if we got the technological capability, or just imagine in your head, Josh Allen threw for over 300 yards, people. It happened. It was fantastic. 2 passing touchdowns, also ran one in. We've always known Josh Allen's a great fantasy QB, and I know my company isn't exactly known for being the biggest Josh Allen fans in the world, but, watching him play was as entertaining as usual, and you got to respect the guy for forcing defenses to, cover every square inch of the field, for better and for worse sometimes. But, all his receivers were looking good. Stephon Diggs caught 8 of 9 targets for 86 yards. John Brown had 6 catches for 70 yards in the score on 10 targets. We had Cole Beasley with 7 targets, Devin Singletary with 7. Rookie Zach Moss scored a touchdown on kind of a broken play around the goal line. Look, I don't think I wouldn't bet on Beasley really coming through and having a bunch of fantasy relevant weeks, but at a minimum, maybe at least I did. I think I might have underestimated Smokey Brown's ability to really also provide potential wide receiver 2 value alongside Stephon Diggs throughout the season. So, a lot of the issues with these wide receivers have always been tied to Josh Allen, but he's proven capable of enabling these guys to big games. And, I think the Buffalo Bills coaching staff and their scheme deserves a lot of credit for that as well. But however you want to put it, there's a lot of talent running around this Bills offense, and Josh Allen is slowly but surely starting to be able to get these guys some big games. So backfield was pretty much in line with, I think, what we were expecting. Devin Singletary, 57% snaps, 9 carries, 7 targets. Zach Moss, 45% snaps, 9 carries, 4 targets. TJ Yeldon was inactive. If either of these guys get hurt, Yeldon will be back in the game. Moss did seem to be on the field much more often near the goal line. The problem is, you can call him the goal line back, but Josh Allen is the team's goal line back. That's the guy that's more often than not, pounding it in from inside the 10-yard line. So, Zach Moss, hey, if something happens to Singletary and he gets to be that lead 1A guy, he'll definitely, be in that RB2 territory. But kind of the same problem with Singletary over this past, season in the game has just been Josh Allen really isn't a very fantasy-friendly quarterback for running backs with his unwillingness to check down and, tendency to vulture away some goal line carries. So, hey, if they keep getting fed targets like this, maybe the opinions will change, but still a little bit pessimistic on either of these running backs providing too much weekly fantasy goodness. Jets offense side of the ball was not good. Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts, it looks like, for a little bit again. Really bad interception thrown back across his body. Only had 215 yards on 35 pass attempts, 69 of which came on a screen to Jamison Crowder that, credit to him for getting into the end zone, but wasn't like the most, legit touchdown I've ever seen. So Crowder, hey, 7 of 13 targets for 115 yards in the score. He's going to be a weekly PPR factor if he keeps getting 13 targets, which, hey, even if it's not 13, I think we can project him for 8+ confidently every week. So Crowder, good for him. Wide receiver 2, 3 borderline in fantasy moving forward. Chris Herndon caught 6 of 7 targets for 37 scoreless yards. Not a great day, but hey, as someone that's told all of you to draft Chris Herndon for weeks, we had a awful matchup in week 1, and Chris Herndon was number 2 on the team in targets, and in PPR leagues was able to provide 13.7 points. I mean, if that's one of your worst games, that's really not that bad of a deal. So still riding high on Chris Herndon moving forward. Le'Veon Bell left early with a hamstring injury. Before that, he made a nice 30-yard catch down the sideline, but wasn't looking all that good. Frank Gore came in later, started to split some work with Josh Adams after Le'Veon went out. So this backfield I am not touching, assuming Bell is out next week. I mean, even if he's in, okay, that's even worse because now we have potential for limited snaps with 3 backs. So would not really worry about touching anyone on the Jets other than Jamison Crowder and Chris Herndon. Packers beat the Vikings 43-34. Aaron Rodgers, oh my goodness. I mean, this whole offseason, I didn't want to really get on the Packers bandwagon because you look at the changes they made and there was nothing. So how can we expect Rodgers to make this big step forward just based on him being pissed off about them drafting Jordan Love in the first round? It didn't quite make sense to me, but whatever it is, this guy walked out there. He threw for 364 yards and 4 scores. Could have even been bigger. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 4 catches, 96 yards in a score, but out of those 2 incompletions on targets to him, I believe he dropped both of them. Alan Lazard, 4 catches, 63 yards and a score. So pretty much like they didn't bring anyone in, but the receivers they already had on the roster found a way to pop off at least in week 1. Credit to them. They're really big guys that have some speed as well. So if they're finally on the same page with Rodgers, then by all means, I mean, that's just always kind of been the issue. Is Rodgers comfortable throwing to these guys? And he certainly seems to be talking up Lazard throughout the offseason. And with MVS, I mean, he did have one play where it was, I'm not sure if he saw defensive holding or not, but Rodgers literally just chucked this ball 50 yards downfield into double coverage to Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And hey, to warrant that sort of treatment, you don't see Rodgers do that every day unless it's his favorite guy. So, of course, his favorite guy remains Davante Adams. 14 catches on 17 targets, 156 yards, pair of scores. I'm not kidding when I've been saying this, everyone. It would not be shocking if Davante has a target total that starts with a 2 at the end of the season. I mean, he deserves to be the weekly wide receiver 1 over Michael Thomas at this point. Running back committee, Aaron Jones played 53% of the offensive snaps. Jamal Williams, 43%. A.J. Dillon played just 3 total snaps, as Tyler Ervin at 18% snaps was actually more involved. I mean, Dillon, it's going to be tough at this rate. If they're going to keep Jamal Williams this involved, I mean, that's a problem. Aaron Jones, the usage was very encouraging. 16 carries, 6 targets. He wasn't able to get much going in the receiving game, but that'll change with a player of his caliber. It's really good that they have kept this as, Aaron Jones as the lead back. The concern was we would see something closer to 40-30-30, but with Dillon just pretty much being a non-factor right now, I would just hope that he's going to eat more into Williams than Jones when it comes time for that. But for now, Jones locked in as an RB1. I don't think either of the other guys were getting enough touches to warrant much usage. Kirk Cousins only threw 25 passes, but 8 went to Adam Thielen, who went for 110 yards and 2 scores. Nobody else had even 5 targets, even with Justin Jefferson, potentially being a solid talent while he's buried a little bit behind BC Johnson. They're getting some other guys involved. He's not going to be scratching fantasy relevance. Same goes for Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith to continue to split snaps. Dalvin Cook, 12 carries, 50 yards, pair of scores on the ground. He played 58% snaps. Madison was at 21%, but I think we're going to see Cook back around, 70, 80% in more normal game scripts. Vikings let this one get away from them a little bit early there. All right, we had the Raiders beat the Panthers 34-230. Derek Carr, 239 yards and a score. Darren Waller walked away with the team high 8 targets. This is one of the few games I have not gotten a chance to review and watch, so excuse me if I overhype or underhype anyone that didn't necessarily deserve it. But Josh Jacobs had 6 targets, everyone, so I cannot wait to review this one. Henry Ruggs had 5, Devontae Booker 3, just 1 for Bryan Edwards, unfortunately. But his snaps were there, so he could be a good post-hype guy. I'm not sure that Carr's going to be able to enable Edwards to these really high fantasy heights this year, but he'll have better weeks moving forward than this one. But yeah, I can't say enough about Josh Jacobs. I mean, he broke 10 tackles just on the ground alone. And that's only one of the 5 times we've seen that happen over the last 2 seasons. 25 carries, 93 yards on the ground, 3 scores, those 6 targets. I mean, Jalen Richard only had 1 target. This was great, everyone. Jacobs played 79% of the offensive snaps. Richard was at 10%, Booker 13%. That is workhorse 3-down usage. Now, the problem is it was ideal game script and a perfect matchup against the Panthers. Last season, Jacobs had a really encouraging week 1 in terms of snap rate too in a game that they were up on the Broncos in. We didn't see that moving forward. So, it's not like Jacobs is going on your bench even if he goes back to this 50-60% role where he's not getting the targets. But, the potential for him to truly turn in a potential top 5 season at the position, it's definitely higher than it was this morning. Teddy Bridgewater, 270 yards and a score on 34 attempts. Target distribution was DJ Moore at 9, Curtis Samuel at 8, Robbie Anderson at 8, and Christian McCaffrey only 4 targets. I do wonder if, we just don't see him kind of lap the field the way he did last year. Still at a 97% snap rate, still scored 2 rushing touchdowns, still made plenty of great plays. I mean, the guy's going to be anyone's idea of a high-end RB1 as long as he's healthy. But, it's just a situation where I don't think we should necessarily expect him to flirt with just these record-breaking target numbers year after year after year. So credit to Robbie Anderson, 6 catches, 115 yards and a score, 75-yard tutty, just filthy double move on Damon Arnett, kind of welcomed him to the league and got by him deep. And Teddy checked down, hit him in stride, a good 35 yards downfield. So nobody else cleared 60 yards. I was a little worried about this Panthers offense early in the season, just being able to put up points due to the lack of kind of overall continuity across their entire team. But, be in this kind of mini shootout here, 34-30. Will definitely be a situation we'll need to upgrade moving forward. I would especially say, Robbie and Curtis, hey, 8 targets each, that'll work. This could be a pass-happy offense. This could be a bad defense all season. I think there's room for these receivers to produce. And, if we want guys in offenses, if we want complementary receivers, it should be an offense that we know we're going to have to throw the ball around. So teams like the Falcons and the Panthers, even if they're not going to probably have the most wins this season, these complementary receivers deserve a long look on the waiver wire. Very fun game. And up next, Patriots 21, Dolphins 11. Cam Newton threw just 19 passes, but hey, 2 touchdowns on the ground. He was fantastic. Had, oh my gosh, so many great broken tackles and just overall Cam goodness. It was really fun to see him, go out there again, do his thing. And it'd been a long time for Cam Newton. Like second play of the game, him just taking that read option right up the gut, making things happen with it. You absolutely love to see it. Now, the interesting things with it was that Julian Edelman actually wasn't used as a full-time receiver in this spot, and he still led the team in targets. Like, he's going to be the lead guy there. But, it was interesting to see N'Keal Harry and Damiere Byrd, the ones with the 80% snap rates, Edelman under 60%. So just a lot of, 2 tight end, even 2 running back formations with them trying to best utilize Cam Newton's abilities. But, with each of Sony Michel, James White, and Rex Burkhead only playing 19 snaps each, a little bit of a concern there moving forward, if how many people Cam's going to be able to really enable in this offense other than himself. I didn't think Edelman's going to rise up and be that, true number 1 receiver, but I think his chances to kind of get the 150 targets he had last year, a little less good than they looked like yesterday. James White, not great. To see him really not pull ahead in this type of offense where I thought he'd kind of jump up and be the number 2 receiver, more or less. It does seem like that guy is going to be N'Keal Harry. So could have been a lot more for the Patriots. Harry had a would-be touchdown, but he fumbled the ball through the end zone. I know a lot of people hate this rule, but as someone that used to play football back in the day, on the defensive side of the ball, I would just say, hey, hold on to the ball as you go through the plane, and we wouldn't have this problem. So don't blame the rule, blame the player for not holding on to the ball. Come on, guys. On the Dolphins side of the ball, not a good game for Ryan Fitzpatrick. 3 interceptions after he finished last season on a tear. Devontae Parker hurt his hamstring early. He had 4 catches. He was looking pretty good. I don't know if he was giving Gilmore the same sort of trouble, but hey, he made a couple grabs on him and was on his way to another big day, but he is a concern moving forward. It's another tough matchup next week for the Dolphins against the Bills, but week 3, they get the Jaguars, and that could be a serious Fitzpatrick bounce back along with Preston Williams and Mike Gesicki. The ground game was a mess. Myles Gaskin ended up leading the way there, and it didn't do much. Jordan Howard scored a touchdown, but had a hysterically bad stat line where he had, I think, 7 carries for 8 rushing yards. But to Jordan Howard's credit, he was rocking a black visor, so I appreciate the devotion, the swag. But Matt Breida, Patrick Laird filled out this 4 RB committee from hell. Do not touch these Dolphins running backs with a 10-inch pole until we have any sort of idea that someone might be seizing control. All right, now we have the Chargers and Bengals. So, real quick, okay, excuse me. Next, we have the Jaguars and the Colts. Now, this one took me by a lot of surprise. I know a lot of people had the Colts as their survivor pick team, so apologies if you fell in that trap. But yes, the Jaguars shocked the world 27-20. And hey, Paris Campbell, 9 targets. T.Y. Hilton, 9 targets. Nyheim Hines, 8 targets. Jonathan Taylor, 6 targets. Phillip Rivers just tried to, I don't think it was him. It was Frank Reich, obviously, calling the game. But Rivers really was forced to almost try to win this game. And, for him to feed this many players, that many targets, it was surprising to see. I did not think Jonathan Taylor and before he got hurt, Marlon Mack were going to be that involved in the passing game. I knew a running back would be involved, but it seemed like Nyheim Hines. I didn't anticipate, over 15 targets being devoted just to the running back room, but it does seem like now that Marlon Mack, who was carted off the field with an ankle injury, it does seem like it's going to be an issue that's going to sideline him for an extended period. We can look at Jonathan Taylor as almost a borderline RB1 as early as next week. If he can get 5-6 targets per game on top of a projected 15-20 carries in a normal week, that's going to be a problem. Now, Nyheim Hines, he's going to be there. He's going to have some fantasy value of his own. Look, he's not Austin Ekeler as a talent, but Phillip Rivers is going to throw you listening. If he's going to throw you 8 targets per game, people are going to talk about you as a fantasy player. So I do think Nyheim Hines is decent. He's shown the ability to work in the slot and out wide during his career. It was very electric when they used him as a punt returner last season. But, I think he's going to be more of the game script dependent RB2, RB3 type. And Jonathan Taylor, fire him up, everyone, because the issue before just with, Mac probably being the lead guy for a little bit, that's gone. So it's the Jonathan Taylor show. All his fantasy investors should be hyped. For the Jaguars, all the credit in the world to Gardner Minshew, 19 of 20, 173 yards and 3 scores. He was sacked 4 times, but he made a bunch of big throws and he continued to scramble and continued to look a lot like anyone's even above average quarterback. Jaguars had no business winning this game, and all the credit in the world to Minshew for getting it done. Didn't help us a whole lot fantasy-wise. Keelan Cole led the way with 5 targets. DJ Chark had just 3 targets. Threw touchdowns to Keelan Chark as well as Laviska Shenault, who also got some Wildcat snaps. That was fun, but ultimately none of these guys even cleared 50 receiving yards. So it was actually James Robinson who had 16 carries for 62 yards and 1 catch for 28 more. That was kind of the most productive offensive talent. So Chris Thompson, only 2 targets. Inexplicably, it's the James Robinson show. At first I didn't want to touch this Jacksonville backfield at all because it was okay. We're getting early down committee between James Robinson, Raquel Armstead, and Davina Zigbo. But with the Zigbo on IR, Armstead dealing with COVID, it's Robinson, and he's being the lead guy. We got to respect it. It wasn't all that impressive of 90 total yards. He wasn't breaking a ton of tackles or showing this crazy burst or anything like that. But hey, if we can get 15 plus touches from anyone, there's more often than not going to be a flex spot available for their services. All right, next up, moving on to 4 o'clock games, Chargers 16, Bengals 13. Apologies everyone on the Tyrod Taylor call, just wasn't working out. Only 7 rushing yards on 6 carries. He had double-digit rushing yards in 39 of 43 games from 2015 to 2017. So not every day that happens. Did have 208 yards on 30 pass attempts. I mean, had a beautiful ball down the right sideline to Mike Williams in tight coverage. Another cool play where he stiff-armed a pass rusher down before converting a third down. But whole lot of it's going to be a situation where this Chargers passing game, I think more times than not, just not really going to be worth targeting. Hey, each of Hunter Henry, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams, Henry and Keenan had 8 targets. Mike Williams had 9. So if Taylor keeps condensing it that much, then great. But I do just have concerns about the overall upside of this passing game. Now, here's the thing with Austin Ekeler. I've seen some people already turn this game into bad news because you only have 1 target. Joshua Kelly was getting some work at the goal line. But if we zoom out just for a second, I mean, Austin Ekeler played 69% of the offensive snaps, career high 19 carries, and had an effective 84 yards. I mean, look, he's going to get more than 1 target in the future. We know he's not going to get, the same 8 to 10 targets per game potential that he had with Rivers, but this is exactly what we're planning on. A high-end rushing role with good efficiency as the lead back, the 1A back in this offense. So Joshua Kelly only played 24% snaps. Justin Jackson had a quad injury and left. Credit to Kelly. He looked good too. 12 carries, 60 yards, and a score on the ground, but it's still Ekeler. He's going to have better games, more games where he's more involved as a receiver. Do not panic. Ekeler is still in every week RB1. Joe Burrow, not the best start, but hey, nearly went down and won it at the end too. AJ Green just wasn't able to get the feet in bounds, and then we had a field goal go horrifically wrong. So that just shows you why you should never trust kickers to get anything done out there on the field. But 193 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick on 36 attempts. But the reason why we've been preaching here on this podcast, Joe Burrow in 2020 was this rushing floor, and he showed it off in game 1. I mean, for him to get 8 carries, 46 yards, and a score, that was really promising. And, I keep going back to this list of the 6 rookie QBs to finish as a fantasy QB1 since 2010. And the similarities for all of them have been starting in week 1 and averaging at least 25 rushing yards per game in college. Burrow checks both those boxes, and we're already seeing that. So, this was a tough one. I, was definitely recommending not to play Burrow. But moving forward, let's get it, everyone. I think Joe Burrow is going to be a weekly top 12 to 15 option at the position. Joe Mixon, 60% snaps, had 19 carries, but just 2 targets. Gio was at 28% snaps and had 5 targets. This is how it was last year, and it's how it's been. Mixon's fine. He'll be able to provide borderline RB1 value with this sort of role throughout the season. He's going to find the end zone in other games, but it was looking like, similar to Josh Jacobs, where Mixon has the receiving ability to potentially be a top 5 fantasy RB if they would really dive into that part of the game. Doesn't appear they're going to do that. So for that reason, I think I'm going to continue to be ranking Mixon around that RB1 borderline. AJ Green coming back, looked pretty good. Caught 5 of 9 targets and should have had a walk-in touchdown, but Burrow missed him pretty badly. John Ross also had an almost touchdown, but to be fair, it seemed like a ball he maybe could have dived for. Tyler Boyd, John Ross, CJ Uzoma all had 5 targets. For now, I think AJ Green is the only guy we can be kind of treating as a top 30 option in this offense. But, if Ross keeps getting these looks and Burrow kind of reins in that deep ball a little bit, and obviously Tyler Boyd's going to have bigger weeks, I think Burrow could be thrown enough here in future weeks to enable multiple fantasy relevant receivers. The 40-year-old quarterback bowl, Brady and the Bucs lost the Saints 34-23. Brady took 3 sacks, was under pressure a lot, 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Hey, to his credit, I mean, he put some deep balls down the sideline to Evans and Scotty Miller that were just perfectly thrown. I mean, the arm strength is not an issue at all. Can he still move the same way in the pocket? No, but he's never been that, much of a guy in the pocket. I think the bigger takeaway isn't Brady being washed. It's just that the Saints defense is really good. I mean, the pick 6 was bad. He didn't get the ball out there quick enough, but it was also a hell of a play by Janoris Jenkins to jump that route and take it distance. So we're going to see better days from the Buccaneers. I think the Saints team deserves to be the favorite to win the NFC as a whole. And, the Buccaneers weren't able to go in there week 1 and get the win, but they're going to improve moving forward. Ronald Jones was the lead guy by far in his backfield, 17 carries, 66 yards, 2 catches, 16 yards receiving. Fournette only had 5 yards on his 5 carries. And, Shady only had 1 target. So it's really looking like Rojo could have this potential three-down opportunity. I mean, I kind of assumed LaShawn McCoy would be more or less taking the Dari Ogunbowale pass-down role, but right now it seems like that's going to be split up a little bit. So would expect Fournette to get a little more involved. But hey, if it's just Rojo and Fournette mostly splitting the carries, that's fine. We can live with two backfields. It's when they get to three that's a problem, but it looks like LaShawn McCoy won't be an issue. I mean, we can kind of confidently project, I think, Rojo back into that RB2 range, as long as we don't start hearing, during this week that Fournette's going to get much, much more involved moving forward. Wide receivers just didn't quite have the targets. Chris Godwin had 6 catches, 79 yards on 7 targets. Scotty Miller, 5.73 on 6 targets. Mike Evans' only catch was a 2-yard touchdown. He did draw some deeper defensive pass interferences, though, on his 4 targets. And O.J. Howard, 4 catches, 36 yards in the score on 6 targets, where Gronk only had 3 targets for 11 scoreless yards. Look, it's, condensed. I think I've been trying to say, and I think a lot of smart people have realized that this is not going to be the same offense that Jameis was able to kind of enable all his fantasy success with last year. I mean, he's consistently chucking it downfield and throwing interceptions and having to be in comeback mode. Brady's going to play much more, winning football, not facing the same sort of game script. And this was a game where they had to throw a lot to kind of get back in it, and we still didn't see anyone even have 8 targets. So there's going to be these wide receivers and tight ends are way too talented to be this quiet every week moving forward. But again, just keep your expectations in line for this offense. But maybe, Brady, I should have mentioned, he did get a rushing touchdown from 2 yards out on a quarterback sneak, so didn't even feel the need to be at the 1. Maybe he is trying to catch Cam, but not so fast in week 1. Drew Brees, just 160 yards on 30 attempts. Did get 2 touchdowns, one to Kamara, one to Emmanuel Sanders, but just kind of the same thing we've seen with him in these playoff losses over the last few years, just not able to push the ball downfield the way they would want. And when these defenses can kind of crowd the line of scrimmage, they start to have some problems. So when they did want to throw downfield, had to dial up a little trick play. Credit to Taysom Hill for hitting Kamara in stride for a nice little 38-yard pass. Kamara was the lead RB, 65% snaps over Latavius Murray, who was at 35%. Latavius racked up 15 rush attempts, though. Kamara had caught his 5 balls, 51 receiving yards. Was held to under 70 total yards, but did have the 2 touchdowns. So fantasy investors are fine. Look, Latavius, he's an RB1 if Kamara misses time, and between then and good matchups, he can provide standalone value. But otherwise, you're not going to want to start this dude. All right, moving on. We got the Cardinals and the 40. I'm sorry, one more time. We got to talk about Michael Thomas real quick. Only 3 catches, 17 yards. Just the second time in 68 career games that Thomas didn't gain at least 20 yards. Credit to Carlton Davis on the Buccaneers for matching Thomas a lot of the way. And, they really started only using him in shadow coverage towards the end of the 2019 season. But he might be a problem. We're going to have to keep an eye on him. So it was actually Kamara leading the way with 8 targets. Jared Cook had 80 yards on 7 targets. Then Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders each had 5. So, again, there's going to be far bigger days to come. Okay, I think it's fair to put Davante Adams over Michael Thomas. I mean, we are seeing what happens sometimes in a more crowded offense like this compared to when we always have the one stud who's going to get fed all the pass game opportunities he can handle. But, I mean, Michael Thomas will not be this quiet for long. All right, Cardinals 24, 49ers 20. Hell of a win for Kyler Murray and company. Kyler, I mean, wasn't amazing throwing the ball, 230 yards on 40 attempts, but 91 yards in a score on the ground on 13 rushes. A lot of them were scrambles, but he just looks so explosive. I mean, a couple of plays where, just getting horizontal and pretty much erasing angles out there. It's crazy what this guy can do, and that's kind of been the reason why throughout this offseason, I saw, hey, the Cardinals, that's a great win. I mean, they don't look anything like the 2019 Browns after how they won this game, but those comparisons to me were never a concern about Kyler's fantasy value because he has the rushing floor. We saw that today. The backfield was interesting because Chase Edmonds found the end zone on a receiving score, ended up having 6 carries as well, 3 catches. I mean, that's solid. That's, double-digit opportunities when we include the targets. 36% snap rate. Drake was still a lead RB, though. 69% snaps, 16 carries, 2 receptions, only 65 total yards. He did score a short goal line touchdown. And busting big plays, but this is great usage. I mean, this is near 70% snaps. Not many guys around the league are getting that. Credit to Edmonds for making the most of his touches, but this could be Drake's backfield moving forward. We're going to see bigger days from him. Wow, DeAndre Hopkins, caught 14 of 16 targets for 151 yards, huge 33-yard gain to set up the go-ahead score, was down just inside the one. He was the only guy doing anything. I mean, Fitz and Kirk only had 5 targets. Worth noting that Kirk racked up a lot of air yards on his opportunities, but hey, it's the DeAndre Hopkins show. We were concerned about if he would get this sort of high-end volume in Arizona. The answer seems to be yes. So now we have, anyone's idea of a top 5 talent at the wide receiver position getting fed potentially double-digit targets per game. DeAndre Hopkins should not be leaving that top 5 anytime this season. Jimmy Garoppolo, 259 yards, pair of scores through the air, really spread it out. I mean, no one even cleared 5 targets. No one cleared 50 receiving yards. Other than Raheem Mostert, had an awesome little angle route where he deked the linebacker, took it 75 yards to the house. He looks so explosive, and he ended up getting 61% of the snaps. Tevin Coleman was just at 10%, Jerick McKinnon at 30%. So pretty much a 1A, 1B backfield in San Francisco with McKinnon not taking all the receiving work. So this is fantastic for Mostert. I mean, if we can get 15 carries a week on top of some newfound receiving usage, he's going to be flirting with legit RB1 value. As it stands, I think Mostert needs to be in most top 20 RB rankings entering next week. On to the final game, everybody. The Rams 20 beat the Cowboys, who only scored 17. Some controversy at the end. Michael Gallup appeared to beat Jalen Ramsey deep. Jalen Ramsey, for being one of the more physically dominant quarterbacks in the league, really seemed to flail on Gallup's alleged OPI push-off. Whatever was the case, they did flag Gallup, and the Cowboys had to try to convert a 4th and 20 a couple plays later. Were not able to do so. Jared Goff gets the W, 275 yards, no touchdown, did throw a pick, had some nice throws, but I mean, it's kind of the same story of what we've seen from him. I mean, if it's a play that gives him time and there's an open receiver, it's going to be put in an accurate location more times than not. The issue is when we see him have to, go to those other reads, have to start to work off script. That's when he gets into trouble. Credit to McVay for forming a game plan. We didn't have to do that today. Robert Woods was on fire early, particularly the first drive. Ended up going for over 100 receiving yards, along with a 14-yard rush. Cooper Kupp, not nearly as productive, only going for 4 catches, 40 yards on 5 targets. Tyler Higbee, 3 catches, 40 yards, while we had Josh Reynolds and Van Jefferson splitting number 3 duties. Hey, this offense, I mean, they're not bad. We know that. Last year in the worst version, they were still 11th or 12th in scoring in the league. But, whether or not both Woods and Kupp can flirt with wide receiver 1 treatment, I don't know. I think that guy is going to be Woods for most of the year. I'm treating Kupp more as around that wide receiver 20 to 24 range. We've now got, dating back to the Rams bye last season, that second half season stretch, and now into week 1, we have seen Kupp take a clear number 2 role behind Robert Woods, who needs to be treated as an every week wide receiver 1. The backfield was very interesting. Malcolm Brown played 61% of the snaps, whereas Cam Akers was at 34%, Darrell Henderson just 6%. Brown had 18 carries for 79 yards, pair of goal line touchdowns, and also caught 3 passes for 31 yards. Akers had 13 carries, 49 yards, 1 catch for 4 yards. So Malcolm Brown looked like the best running back out there, honestly. And, it was just the first game for Akers. We've seen plenty of rookie running backs over the years, need to get their feet wet before they can do too much. But Brown was the guy out there, and that 61% snaps, that's in line with what we've seen from McVay throughout his entire Rams tenure. Whoever the lead guy is usually flirting with 60% snaps, 15 or more touches. So yeah, it's obvious Cam Akers is very involved, and Henderson, as he gets healthier from the hamstring, you would think he'll get a little more involved. But hey, if Browns can keep being this effective, and in a situation where it really does seem like they want to get him on the field more times than not when they are around the goal line, he's going to be flirting with, kind of weekly RB2, RB3 value. I don't think he's going to run away with this thing and be the same sort of threat that Gurley was, but this offense is going to put up points, and Brown could be the guy to score a lot of them if he keeps getting this sort of usage. So I wouldn't blow 50% of your fab on him. I see this being kind of a fluid week-to-week situation. But, if you're in just a waiver wire league and you have just the number 1 waiver, yeah, using on Malcolm Brown, that makes sense, because anytime we can get 15-plus touches in this sort of offense, that's good for fantasy business. Dak Prescott, 266 yards on 39 attempts, added 30 yards on the ground, David would have been bigger if not for the Gallup OPI. Credit to Barstool Big Cat for this idea about Dak, but I like what he said one time about it, where Dak, you rarely leave Cowboys games thinking, okay, like Dak lost that game. It doesn't happen. But you do leave a lot of these games going, man, I really wish Dak could have done more to, go ahead and seize that game, go out and win it. So, he made some great plays. I still think Dak's a great quarterback, and he fully deserves to be paid as such by the Cowboys. But, 6.8 yards per attempt. He didn't have a bunch of time. I mean, the Cowboys' offensive line was all sorts of banged up, and it wasn't like guys were just running wide open downfield and he was missing them. But, at the end of the day, a win is a win is a win. Cowboys weren't able to come away with it. Amari Cooper, monstrous, 14 targets, just 10 catches for 81 yards. Wasn't able to break off anything big, but, he is the undisputed number one wide receiver in this offense. Don't forget it. CeeDee Lamb, 5 catches, 59 yards on 6 targets. Looks very swaggy in that 88. Looks a little slim at this point, but perfectly capable of putting together some solid fantasy performances. I think him and Gallup should kind of be treated almost similarly at this point. I know we still kind of maintain that gap between them, but right now, with CD getting 6 targets, Gallup getting 5, they're pretty much being treated as kind of like consensus number 2 options behind Cooper. And even if I wouldn't be shocked if Cooper doesn't have that big of a stranglehold on the one spot on a week-to-week basis. So all these guys will be able to produce. And, if it wasn't for that OPI on Gallup, all 3 of them would have produced in week 1. It was good to see Zeke Elliott really get a nice pass game role, 3 catches, 31 yards. And a score on 4 targets, 87% snaps. I mean, just the usual bell cow usage for Zeke. He looked really elusive out there, though, and I'm not saying he hasn't over the past few years, but he looked more like that kind of 2016 rookie running back, just really making guys miss and some elusive moves, especially on that touchdown reception where he cut it back into the middle. So that's going to do it, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this recap. First one of these we've done this year. I want to do these quick recap pods after Sunday, Monday, and Thursday night football. Just go through, the usage, get on with it, because it's, hey, we got to go through this and evaluate and then move on, change our opinions for the better, and hopefully be, more winning fantasy investors next time around. So thank you all for listening. This has been the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Ian Hartitz, and until next time, take care, everyone.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.